Here's a quick tutorial about how to use Desmos. I'm going to graph an exponential function, graph its inverse, and then graph its inverse as a logarithmic function. I will explain all of that. But first, let's go to Desmos. So you can just type in Desmos in the progress bar, or in the address bar rather, desmos.com. If you're using Google, it's the first thing that will come up because Desmos is a Google product. And what we want is Math Tools, Graphing Calculator, there you go. This is also linked in our weekly schedule. So if you were to go to our weekly schedule, Desmos Graphing Calculator, it's right there. Anyways, here's my Desmos. May as well log in using your Google so you can save your graphs, save whatever graph you're doing. So I'll call this one, what should I call it? Well, I guess I have to do something first. I'm going to type an exponential function. So how about f of x equals, how about 3 to the x? To get that exponent up there, I'm going to use Shift 6. There's a little up arrow there. That tells the computer that I'm going to type an exponent. You can see that my cursor moved up. So put in the x there. And there's my graph. It just appeared there. And I don't have to use x. I could also, if I wanted to do, I don't know, speed, S for speed, I could do that. I can use whatever letters I want. So there's that. It gives me the graph. And I can scroll in and out. Suppose I want a table of values. I can click on this gear, and it gives me two options, table of values or copy. Honestly, I sometimes use copy when I'm writing complicated equations because I'll write a complicated equation and then I'll copy it and change the copy to make the next equation rather than having to start all over again. So that's useful. I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to make a table. So there's my table. On the left column, it's the x's. On the right column, it's the y's. Let me change this to x, f of x, x. There we go. Suppose I didn't want this whole graph. Suppose I only wanted it to start at 0 for some reason. Suppose it was some function where you never had negative numbers. Well, I can restrict the domain. I can restrict the x's that I can put in, or whatever the inputs are. I can restrict them by typing right after the equation. I type the squiggy bracket, which is just to the right of the P on your keyboard. Type that in. And how about if I'll do 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 10. So I've restricted the domain for all numbers between 0 and 10. So if I scroll out, yeah, it's going to, well, 10 is going to be pretty high up there. We're not going to see where this graph ends, but it really does go up to 10. Let me change this to 3. Now we can see the graph ends. Okay, so I can restrict the domain if I want to. I don't have to. Notice when I restricted the domain, the -2 and -1 on my table of values became undefined. That's because I just told Desmos that I can only use inputs greater than 0, greater than or equal to 0. So -1 and -2 are undefined. If I remove this restriction here, those will go back to being, well, here. Now they're in there. I'll put it back. Okay. Also, just a little side note, this less than or equal to, you can use the on-screen keyboard to get that. I find it easier just to use my own keyboard. So next to just to the right of the M on your keyboard, there's the less than and greater than symbols. And if you want to do, like I have, you want to do less than or equal to, you can simply type the less than and then the equals, and it will combine them. Desmos will combine them to the less than or equal to. Okay, so I got this function. I'm going to actually unrestrict the domain, just make it go on forever. I want to do the inverse function of this. I'm also going to get rid of my table of values. I want to do the inverse function of this. And suppose all I want is to look at the graph and see what the inverse looks like. Well, we've done these a bunch of times. I am going to, and the steps that we did was, I'm going to change f of x to y. And then I'm going to just copy the same graph. And I'm going to switch. right? Because inverse functions literally, and again, I don't know if literally is the right word to say when you're talking about math, but mathematically just switch the x and the y. So I can do that. There's the graph of my inverse function. And I can scroll in and out and look at it. Now, that doesn't tell me what the actual inverse function is, right? It just tells me that Desmos is smart enough to graph it with the information I've given it. However, I know that the inverse function here, if I'm raising 3 to the power of x and getting y, then I know that I could type the inverse function as y equals, I know it's a logarithmic function. I'm going to go down here to the keypad, click on functions. I have to scroll pretty far down. I want to enter a logarithmic function. Where is it? There it is. Be careful, right? Not this log. I want this one here because this one, you see the little subscript a. This allows me to type the base. So, and it didn't put in there. Let's try that again. All right, scroll down, log to the base a. Notice now over here in the equation bar, the cursor is a little subscript to the log, and I want to do log to the base 3 of x. Now I'm going to hide the inverse function that I had already done. All right, so there's my original function. There's the logarithmic function. Hopefully you can see it's the same inverse function. Let me change this to a different color. I'll make it like orange. Right. So now if I hide the logarithmic function, it's still there in orange. So that really is the inverse. These bottom two are saying the same thing. Because if y equals 3 to the x, then the inverse function would be log to the base 3 of x equals y. That's how to type a logarithmic function. If you want to save it now, once you've signed in, you can save it. It'll ask for a name. How about we say screencastify logs. Great. You can call it whatever you want. If you want to share it with somebody, this little arrow up here will give you a URL that you can copy and share. Be careful because unlike other Google products, if I make more changes, the link that I share will just be the link that I share at this moment. So it wouldn't include the new, if I continue to write functions and graph more functions here, it would not be included. I would have to get a new link by going up here and getting it again. Anyways, that's enough. Thank you.